일단은 네, 아무래도 생각을 좀 하실 시간이 필요하실 것 같으니까는요. 영화를 보시고 난 후에 제가 먼저 이제 그 질문을 하겠습니다. 일단 그 마지막 열정부터 얘기를 할까요? 마지막 열정, 잔 파우스트 감독과 제가 저기 독일어라서 웨렌츠 두 감독님의 만든 마지막 열정이라는, 어떻게 보면은 되게 짧고 뭐 쉽게 얘기해서 모던하지만 또 그 관객 보신 분들이 이해하기에는 또 그 어려운 부분도 있을 것 같기는 한데요. 이 작품 두 감독님의 합작품인 마지막 열정과 관련한 이야기부터 들어보죠. 아시는 범위 안에서 큐레이터로서 이 작품 만든 두 작가분에 대해서 먼저 소개를 좀 부탁드리겠습니다.
Yeah, so as you said, it's a collaborative work by Jean Faust and Yonsei, and they frequently collaborate on video pieces. I think what is important to know is that Jean Faust's works are frequently shown as loop installations as well as in cinema. So you could see there was sort of like a hint at this loop structure in the version that we saw here today, because the first scene repeats after the singer recites this poem. And Faust and Sehe frequently work with very elliptical narratives, very short scenes that that depict, in a way, everyday tasks that the people who star in the film would do regularly. So this band that you see, they're a real band, and they practice, but then something happens, a short incident that sort of invades this normalcy and creates a sense of mystery, and it's sort of purposefully left unclear what we are seeing. So there's lots of room for the audience to interpret and sort of add what's going to happen after this little scene is finished, what happened before. And when you see it in a loop, it also kind of, in a way, every repetition kind of alters your understanding of what this scene might be. So yeah. So I don't think, I'm sorry that I can't really explain what happened there, but I think that's sort of also not. I don't think if the filmmakers were here that they would either be able, or if they were able, they probably wouldn't be willing to explain it, because the mysterious nature of this piece is sort of also very, it's very important, I guess, to it. That the poem that is recited and that gives the film the title is by Emily Dickinson.
이런 영화를 보고 그 속 시원하게 저게 뭐입니까라고 물어보지 관객분은 없을 거라고 생각합니다. 충분히 그 의도는 알고 감상하셨을 거라고 생각하는데요. 일단 그 뭐 인스톨레이션을 많이 하는 또 아티스트이고 하다 보니까 어떤 그 스타일이라는 면에서 아까 이제 그 일상성이라는 말씀을 하셨는데, 사실 그 안에는 어떤 정서적인 에너지, 결국 제목이 이제 마지막 열정이니까는요. 마치 이제 그 죽음 직전에 어떤 그것이 무엇이든 간에 어떤 정서적 상태에 관한 그런 모양을 다루려고 했던 것 같기도 합니다. 물론 저희의 해석이고요. 근데 또 이 두 아티스트가 이렇게 협력한 거는 처음인 건지, 아니면 그 전에도 또 작업한 적이 있었는지가 일단 궁금합니다.
That's a very interesting take on it. I think in the poem, death ultimately is victorious, also, right? So, death is in the poem. It's this discussion between death and passion, and death ultimately is victorious in that discussion. So I think this was not their first collaboration. So it's probably also, I mean, if you work continuously in a certain style, of course you kind of, I wouldn't say perfect it, but you kind of, you carve out the things that you are looking for, with each piece. It's also sort of like a continuous working on this form, I would say. I mean, what I think is also very striking in this film, in terms of how an everyday occurrence is sort of, in a way, taken or is given a spin, is just by a very simple formal devices. The disconnection of sound and image, which is, I guess, very prevalent in this work, and which also, of course, connects it to the other piece we saw.
네, 그러면 이사벨 프림 얘기를 이제 이게 두 작품을 일단 대략적인 질문하고 그다음에 관객분들한테는 두 작품에 관련된 질문을 그냥 자유롭게 받는 게 좋을 것 같아요. 그래서 이사벨 프림의 적과 흙 같은 경우는 참 되게 흥미로운 영화인데요. 저희가 알기로는 릭 물레라는 이제 프랑스 다큐멘터리를 많이 만드시고 했던 감독님의 초안을 바탕으로 이제 영화를 만들었다고 합니다. 그 페넬로페라는 여기 이제 나오는 그 카메라인데 35mm하고 디지털을 동시에 촬영할 수 있는 카메라라고 하죠. 그래서 페넬로페가 절도당하는 그런 어떤 발상으로부터 시작한 영화인데, 일단 첫째 굉장히 영화가 사실 난해하다고 하면 난해할 수 있는데 볼 때 어렵게 느껴지지 않는다라는 점, 되게 발랄하고 그러니까 좀 무겁지 않은 거, 그런 점이 이 영화의 굉장히 흥미로운 지점인 것 같아요. 그래서 어쨌든 이 이사벨 프림의 이 적과 흙을 어떻게 보면 이 아스날에서 또 이 셀렉션할 때 뭔가 굉장히 흥미롭게 주목한 부분이 있어서 어떻게 보면 발견이라고 할 수도 있는데, 이 아티스트에 대한 또 설명과 적과 흙에 관련한 특징적인 부분들 생각하고 있는 그런 것들을 좀 대략 말씀해 주시면.
Well, over the years we have shown, I think, all in all 4 films by Isabelle Prim in form expanded, most of which in a way deal with her reverence for like some idol, be that a person that was very important in film history or the feminist idols. We had a film of hers about Gertrude Stein. We showed a film of hers that dealt with Calamity Jane, the U.S. American Western sort of how do you say, sort of heroine, yeah. And all what her style is very, I think what intrigues us about her work is her very, very unique style, a very playful and very imaginative way of using basically everything that film can offer, from playing with the sound image connection to very associative montage, and then also her very very keen interest in film history as well, and her critique of it. I mean, this film is, although it is sort of a playful and by no means mean portrait of this very important figure, Jean-Pierre Bouviala, who was the person who invented the time code and also invented a very light camera that was very important for a lot of Nouvelle Vague filmmakers. For example, Jean-Luc Godard, who we see in this film. It's also a very poignant critique of sort of male-dominated film culture, the problematic of sort of female representation in the films of these heroes of not only French cinema. So I think this combination of a playfulness that speaks to a sense of trying to discover new forms of using film, while at the same time being very conscious of the film history that she's moving in. That's at least, speaking for me, but I think it's probably my colleagues would agree. This is something that's very appealing to us as programmers. Yeah.
네, 두 가지 질문이 있는데요. 첫 번째는 이 프로그램을 큐레이팅하는 과정에 있어서 이 마지막 열정이라는 영화와 적과 흑이라는 영화를 혹시 두 개를 동시에 같은 시간대에 배치하고 그 순서에 배치에 있어서 혹시 단순히 영화의 병렬적인 나열 말고 다른 의도가 있었는지 궁금하고요. 두 번째로 적과 흑이라는 영화에서 그 테크놀로지에 있어서 어떤 작가가 자기만의 애티튜드를 갖고 있다고 생각했는데요. 예를 들면 35mm와 디지털 방식을 동시에 찍을 수 있는 카메라라던가 저는 잘 몰랐거든요. 그리고 3D 프린터로 그 다이노소어의 모양을 찍어내는 그 영상이라던가 그런 것들이 어떤 영화에서 작용을 하고 또 작가가 테크놀로지에 대해서 어떤 입장을 갖고 있는 것인지 궁금합니다.
First question, there's a very practical reason to, or at least that's sort of like a rule that we try to follow, not to have a very short film after a long film, because it's sort of, we have had the experience that for the viewers it's let's say easier to follow the program if it doesn't end on a very short note, and also to get into the shorter film. But then I also think in a way it worked very well. This not just on these like strictly formal or practical in terms of these practical reasons, but also in terms of that the first film, since it's so open and sort of also in a way probably prepares you to expect something that requires a lot of I won't say work because that sounds so harsh, but a lot of sort of commitment from the viewer, in terms of what to expect and how to engage with the film that you're about to see after that. And then there's, of course, all kinds of, some of them we've already alluded to, sort of things that connect these two films in terms of their approach to filmmaking. And the question about technology, I can only speak to my interpretation, of course, and not speak for Isabel, but maybe the reason that you have not heard of this camera might be that it wasn't very successful. So the company which underwent, I think, a series of bankruptcies in its history, also went or filed for bankruptcy again after it introduced the Penelope because it just didn't sell. I guess it's one of those intermediate technologies that just don't really take on because the market has already moved on to the next thing, which is fully digital. And I guess this image of the dinosaur, this extinct species being produced by a super high futuristic technology is, of course, a very fitting image for that. As it is also, I guess, can be read as sort of like a metaphor for Boviala himself, or his intention to kind of hold on to the 35mm technology. Yeah, but I don't think as I said before, I don't think that it's meant in the well, it's meant in a more sort of sympathetic sense. You know, that there's also kind of a certain positive quality in that he remains this dinosaur in a way, you know, who's steadfast and holds on to his values and these kinds of things. So I don't think it's meant to show him as this outdated person who isn't able to keep track of what's going on in the world. Yeah. Nana, you want to add?
Just to add, to explain the metaphor with which the first light camera was sold was like a cat on the shoulder, and that's why the dino cat. But it's, to me, to add what Uli said in Isabel's work, her adoration for forgotten idols, which includes sort of discarded pop stars and forgotten actresses, and is also, in this case, I think, is talking about how the history of cinema is connected to the history of the market. So whatever technology becomes marketable writes part of an aesthetic history, and how that needs to be critically investigated. And as I actually wanted to say that about the curatorial choices in all of the programming, it's always often, I would say, our idiosyncratic approaches. We always make conscious decisions what we put together in film programs, and they can be sometimes just 2 short films or very, very long films. But they for us, the films we put together always have resonances. And most of the times not necessarily content, but much more of, yeah, I guess formal or aesthetic resonances, or connections of just little moments that pick up from one to the other.
아까 울리 씨도 잠깐 언급을 하셨지만은 일단 사운드와 이미지의 관계에 대해서 얘기를 할 수밖에 없는 영화인 것 같아요. 그 보비알라가 찍은 실제 16mm 영화 속에 나오는 그 프랑스 여배우 그 금발머리, 제 이름 갑자기 생각 안 나네요. 롬바 이름 뭐더라? 예, 그리고 또 그 화면 속에서 잠깐 우리가 또 장리 고다르의 목소리도 듣게 되고 그러는데, 아까 이제 그 영화사라는 측면 말씀하셨는데, 영화 역사를 두고 봤을 때에 테크놀로지가 가지고 온 이미지와 사운드의 관계에 미친 어떤 영향력이라는 것, 그것이 과연 우리가 제대로 분석되고 있는지는 잘 모르겠지만은 어쨌든 그런 측면을 분명히 다루고 있는 것 같아요. 그래서 그런 것에서 영감을 받아서 만든 영화인 것 같은데, 이런 사운드와 이미지의 관계에 관한 이자벨 프림의, 제가 사실 이자벨 프림의 다른 영화들을 못 봤습니다. 그래서 혹시 다른 영화도 좀 언급을 해주셔도 좋고, 그런 알고 있는 이자벨 프림의 그런 측면에서의 작업에 관련된 이야기를 좀 듣고 싶습니다.
Well, I think this style that has a very sort of let's say her interest in working a lot with montage and especially with sound montage. I mean, here it's so dominant, but it's very dominant in her other films as well. For example, the last film that we showed of hers is a very short film, I think only maybe 3 minutes long. Calamity Key, that's a short film that investigates, as I said, this Western hero, Calamity Jane, and there it's sort of there's the juxtaposition of her own material with archival footage, with also not only archival film footage, but archival texts and then archival sounds, like stock sounds or sounds from other films. She uses these she doesn't seem to have any inhibitions of mixing things together, and also using them in a way that sort of highlights in a sense, like the artifice of the images that she's working with. So everything always feels fabricated in a way. There's no pretense at this is something. This is like a realistic depiction of something, but it's always already trying to go beyond that illusion in a way. It's trying to go beyond that sort of surface impression that film is showing a reality, and it's always already hinting at the fact that, of course, this is a fabricated image, a fabricated narration. And by that, trying to dismantle it or trying to, heighten a sense of the fact that it's sort of important to look for that fabrication in a way.
Almost.
Yeah, I mean, she's mixing all these different types of images, but then in the end, I mean, what is the outcome is a highly fabricated, but visibly fabricated product. I would say. I mean, the Hollywood does the same, but it's sort of hiding it. I would probably not say that it's Isabel Prim's aim to sort of unmask Hollywood, but this is definitely And just to add, I mean, so that's basically sort of like a formal interest of hers, and I think in La Rouge et la Noire, there's this perfect match between her formal interest and sort of her protagonist or the topic that she's working with, as this film is, I guess it's so much about asynchronicity, so that the image and the sound is always off, but it's a film about the person whose greatest achievement in his career was to invent a machine that makes the synchronization of film and sound possible. Yeah.
그 제목에서 적과 흑 소설과 관계가 있는지 첫 번째 질문이고요. 두 번째는 적하고 흑을 색깔을 레드하고 블랙으로 그 대비를 시켰는데 그거 제목에서 뜻하는 것이 무엇인지. 예.
네.
I'm sorry to say that I don't know the answer to both of these questions. But Luc Mollet wrote the screenplay. I mean, the film that Luc Mollet wanted to make, like, that was never realized. So Isabelle realized that project about Aton. So maybe the title comes from Luc Mollet's original script. But as to the meaning, I'm not sure. It might, but this is just me guessing. It might have something to do with sort of calibration of the camera. How to how the camera can reproduce colors, something like that. But this is just a wild guess.
No, I think Uni's question was referring. I mean, it's the famous title of as a title of a novel by what's his name, Stendhal, but she never really talked about that. I think because the layers of cinema history and were more important. I mean, to me, clearly, anything red is one of those iconic moments of cinema, like the woman in red. But it never in all of the discussions somehow I don't recall that was a big issue.
아까 이제 그 마지막 열정에서 적각으로 이어지는 거에 대한 물론 어떤 비슷한 어떤 공통점이 있을 거라고 말씀을 하셨었는데, 그게 이제 명확히 무엇인지 뭐 얘기 안 하셔도 좋지만, 그러니까 어떤 스타일 면에서든 무엇이든 관객이 두 영화를 봤을 때에 느낄 수 있는 어떤 지점이 비슷한 지점이 있다라고 하면 과연 그게 무엇일지 한번 얘기를 듣고 싶습니다.
Well, I mean, we already talked about this disconnection of image and sound, but I think both films have a certain playfulness and a certain, let's say, sense of wonder, looking for sort of mysterious or incomprehensible moments. They both work with very, very sort of elliptic narratives. They sometimes only hint at narratives. They're very much reliant on a very active active audience, and yeah, I think they're both sort of it's a very sort of imaginative style that alludes to a lot of like fantasy and imagination. I think that would be, that would be some of the things that connect them for me. I don't know if Nana maybe wants to add something to that too. Or.
I would say we as curators are part of the audience. The pleasure that we have in viewing is the one that we hope we share when we put it in the cinema. But I think these two films pick up very well also from the program with which we opened yesterday, because they both have to do with the hors champ, with what is off the screen, but in a very particular way, and refer or do something about the space between the projection and the screen, or the camera and the image. In the case of Isabelle and Jan, who often does this kind of whispering from behind the location, supposed location of the camera, it's most obvious, but it repeats that space in which we sit and in which we as audience make the moment of the film happen. And it's something very particular, but also I think it's almost like a gift. It places the filmmaker and us together in this poetic pleasure of cinema.
네, 아마도 아까 이제 장난스럽다라는 얘기를 했는데 두 작품 다 그런 면에서 보면 왜 어떤 작품이든 뭐 그 전달하고자 하는 메시지든 주제든 너무 심사숙고해서 너무 엄중하게 선택해서 골라 강박관념에 이렇게 사로잡혀서 이렇게 내놓은 것 같은 이렇게 그 장면을 볼 땐 사실 없잖아 부담을 관객도 느낄 수가 있거든요. 근데 두 작품의 경우는 또 다르게 얘기하면 약간 당혹스러울 정도로 이게 한 뭐 그 주사위를 던져서 하나가 나올지 두 개가 나올지, 그러니까 열린 가능성을 조금 더 놓고 이렇게 가볍게 툭 던지는 듯한 그런 느낌. 그래서 어떤 문제 제기의 방법론은 분명히 있는데 그것이 이렇게 그 너무 그 묵직하게 무겁게 다루는 것이 아니라 좀 더 가볍고 조금 더 열린 어떤 그 방식으로 보여줄 수 없을까를 고민한 것 같은 그런 작품이어서 굉장히 인상적이었고요. 그래서 저의 개인적인 느낌은 시간이 이제 많지 않아서 마지막으로 앞으로도 영화가 계속 이제 시작되고 있는데요. 포럼 제가 여러 번 강조하는데 토요일 날 저희 포럼이 있거든요. 그래서 그때 오셔서 더 많은 이야기를 듣고 또 질문도 할 수 있는 그런 시간을 가졌으면 좋겠고요. 다음 프로그램도 있으니까 약간 홍보를 우리 울리 지몬스 씨께 부탁드릴게요. 우리.
What's up next? I think tomorrow we have Tomorrow we have a short film program. There's two short film programs in this program that kind of really show, I think, a really great diversity of the types of films that we show in terms of formal approaches and so in terms of themes that they deal with. And you should, if just like a personal favorite of mine, if I can mention that one also tomorrow at 3, I believe, there will be a screening of Nicolas Wei's Anders Molussien, which is a very special occasion to see this film that was totally independently produced on 16mm and it will be it will be a unique experience because this film is different each time it is presented. So you can even come back maybe for all 5 screenings and see different films each time.
많은 관심 가져주시기 바랍니다. 네, 감사합니다.